Hello and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, you will learn how to select data from multiple tables by using the Postgres inner join clause. With the inner join, it will return records that have matching columns from the participating tables. So any record returned from using the inner join will have matching values from the columns in both tables. What that means is that the participating tables must have columns that are matching. For example, you can have on one table, they've got a column called Joe Blogs. On the other table, they must also have a column called Joe Blogs. Let's have a look at a simple syntax of how to implement an inner join. So this is the syntax, just a basic syntax here. So you select the column names from the participating tables. In the from field, you specify the first table, and then you perform the inner join on the second table. And this is how you use the on keyword to indicate this is what actually implements the join. It's like a glue, that's what glues it on. So you do an inner join on table B on table A dot column. That is the column from table A where you're performing the join on. Will be, you set that to equals to the column on table B. It will make more sense if I actually show you an example of how this works. So this is just a simple illustration here. We've got a table A here and a table B. So you will it will return records that match columns from both tables. So they must have participating columns that match. I am going to perform an inner join on two tables that belong to the DVD rental sample database, this database here. So let me expand the tables here and I'll tell you the two tables I'm going to use for the inner join. So I'm going to use the customer table, which is this table here, and the payment table. So one of the criteria in a table join is that the tables that are participating in the join must have columns that match. So let me look at the customer table first. You can see the customer table. These are the tables in the customer table. And it has a customer ID, store ID, first name, last name, and so on. So I want you to take note of this. It has a customer ID. Now let's look at the payment table. You can see here the payment table has 6 columns. It also has a customer ID. All right, so this customer ID here matches the customer ID for the customer table. So we have a matching column. So these two tables can participate in the join. This is an illustration of the relationship between the two tables that I am going to use to illustrate the inner join. This is the customer table. It has a customer ID, which is the primary key on this table. And you have a customer ID on this table called payment. Although it's not the primary key, but there is a relationship. You can see that of all the columns here and of all the columns here, the columns that match is the customer underscore ID and the customer underscore ID here. So those are the two columns we are going to use for the inner join operation. So looking at this ERD diagram here, this basically indicates one-to-many relationships. So basically what this means is that each customer may have 0 or many payments. See, that's the 0 there. May have 0 or many payments. Each payment belongs to one and only one customer. That's what this is. All right. So the link between these two tables is established via the customer ID field, which is this field here and this field there. To save time, so that you don't have to watch me type all the statement for the query, I've already pre-written the query. I'm just going to explain it to you. So I'm just going to right click on the first table here, the customer, and click on the query tool. And once the query tool launches, I will paste the code I've written into that, and then I'll run through it with. So this is the code I've written here, and in this statement here, I have used the inner join clause, this inner join clause here, to join the customer table to the payment table. So let me start with the first statement here. So the select statement basically is what will read or get the data out of the table. And I've got the customer dot. The dot here indicates that this field here, customer ID, this column is coming from the customer table. So you separate the column from the table name with a period or a dot. That's what this means. Customer underscore ID is coming from the customer table. The first name also is coming from the customer table. Last name also customer table. Email here, the amount from the customer table as well. Sorry about that. I may have confused you a little bit. Let me just run through this again. I'll start again. You start with a select statement. So you need the select keyword to retrieve data from a table. And here, because we have two customer ID field we're going to use, customer ID that belongs to the customer table and the customer ID that belongs to the payment table. All the columns listed here are the columns that will be displayed when the query has been executed, and when it outputs, these are all the columns it's going to output. The reason I've got the customer underscore ID here, so that it differentiates that this customer ID here that's going to be displayed in the output belongs to the customer table. That's the main purpose of this, to differentiate this customer ID from the customer ID in the payment table. The first underscore name is coming from this customer table. The last underscore name is coming from the customer table, and also is the email. The amount comes from the payment table, and the payment date also comes from the payment table. So I've got two columns that are coming from the payment table, and the others are coming from the customer table. So now in the from field, we are specifying the customer table. Okay, so all the customer table where we're specifying the from field, and the inner join, we're doing the inner join on. Notice after the inner join clause, we specify the name of the other table participating in the join, which is the payment table, and we use the on keyword to indicate where the join is going to take place, kind of like where the glue is going to be placed. So the join is on the customer underscore ID table, or the customer underscore ID column that belongs to the payment table. We're going to set that to equals to the customer ID table that belongs to the customer table. So it's going to combine the records from these two tables when the query outputs. So let's give that a go. Run the query. If everything goes okay, we should see a good output. All right, so we've got over 14,000 rows retrieved. So we now have the customer ID, customer underscore ID field is a combination from both the customer table and the payment table. All right, so that when it says this customer ID from this payment equals to that, this is where the join takes place. So you can see now we've now got data from from multiple tables, courtesy of a join, an inner join using columns that match in both tables. This illustration is just on 2 tables. You can perform a join on many tables as possible, as long as you have columns from all the participating tables that match. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and bye for now. If there are any aspects of this lecture you do not understand, please feel free to let me know. Many thanks and bye.